Good afternoon, and welcome to today's Facebook Live Consular Conversations. Today's program is going to focus on H-2A and H-2B temporary worker visas. H-2A visas are for agricultural workers. H-2B visas are for non-agricultural workers who want to work in a service sector, for example, at a restaurant, at a hotel, an amusement park, etc. H-2 workers, whether they're H-2As or H-2Bs, are really vital to the United States economy. They help us guarantee our food security. We are really grateful as the US government and on behalf of US businesses to have H-2 workers working in the US to help us in those areas. And the H-2 program is also really important for Jamaica. The H-2 workers send money back to their families, and that helps put children in school, helps build a house, and pay other household expenses. So this is a great program for both countries. I would like to start by introducing Brandon Macker. He is our fraud prevention officer here at the embassy. And also I'd like to introduce Andrea Miller-Stennett and Jillian Carotis, who are joining us from Jamaica's Ministry of Labor and Social Security, also known as MLSS. Andrea and Jillian, I'd like to turn to you first. Welcome again. Would you like to state your titles and describe your roles at MLSS?
Okay, thank you, Maureen. I'm Jillian Carotis, Divisional Director, Industrial Relations and Allied Services. A mouthful, but the Allied Services covers employment services, local and overseas. So that's my role in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security.
Thanks, Maureen. I'm Andrea Miller-Stennett. My responsibilities include overseas employment, the monitoring of private employment agencies, as well as local employment.
Thank you very much again for being here. Brandon, if I can ask you the next question, would you like to describe the Fraud Prevention Unit's role in the H-2 program, and also briefly describe the new Jamaican Temporary Workers Security Program?
Sure. So the Fraud Prevention Unit in the context of H-2s really has two important goals. The first is to protect the integrity of the visa issuance process and ensure that bona fide workers are going to work on the program in the United States. And the second is really to protect the interests of Jamaican workers, to ensure they're being paid what they should be paid, that they're being treated in accordance with U.S. labor laws and Jamaican laws as well. The Jamaican Temporary Worker Security Program is a new initiative that we rolled out in January of this year to underscore the U.S. government's commitment to doing both of those things, to protecting the rights of temporary workers in the United States and also protecting the integrity of the visa issuance process.
Great. I'd like to address the next question to our friends from MLSS. If a Jamaican citizen is interested in working in the United States, how do they start with the process with MLSS? And is that different depending on if you're an H-2A agricultural worker or if you're, for example, an H-2B non-agricultural worker?
So the MLSS has two programs, that is the H-2A agricultural program and H-2B program. And persons who are interested in the H-2A program should have some farming experience, and we normally indicate that if they have the RADA licenses, that also helps to indicate that they are bona fide agricultural workers. The H-2B program, as you've been saying, is a hotel program, and we normally require persons to have hotel-related experience or some other experience that gives them a chance to do well. And they apply directly to the MLSS, and we have published the contact information on screen so that persons can know how to reach MLSS. You can go to our regular offices or to the Members of Parliament office, and that is how they will get on to the H-2A primarily. We need a resume for the H-2B program. So that is to be forwarded to us and we make contact with them. Also, very importantly, we have licensed private employment agencies that provide services for H-2B only. And the worker will make their applications to these licensed employment agencies, and you can find a list of those licensed agencies on the MLSS website.
Very good. Anything you'd like to add, Andrea?
You can also find that list on the LMIS website.
Okay.
So the both websites has a
Brandon?
list.
And so on that note, the Jamaican Temporary Worker Security Program, really what it does is ensure that when someone applies for a visa, that they're on the H-2B program, that they're working with one of the licensed recruiters, either by MLSS or the U.S. Department of Labor.
Great. So the information is in the chat on how to contact MLSS, email addresses, as well as phone numbers that can be used if someone is in doubt about whether or not a recruiter is actually licensed to operate in Jamaica. Because what we know here at the embassy from MLSS is that MLSS does require that all H-2As, which are the agricultural workers, all H-2As must go through MLSS. MLSS closely controls that process. If someone wants to work in the US on an H-2B visa, and they choose to use a recruiter or a travel agency here in Jamaica for help, they must use a recruiter or a travel agency that is certified and approved by MLSS. And the list of those approved recruiters is on the MLSS website. And the US Department of Labor also has a list, and there should be a link in the chat as well, of several different recruiters that the US Department of Labor has authorized to work to help these workers. Do you want to talk a little bit about why it's a controlled process? Why, like, what sort of scams happen, or how people are being taken advantage of if they're not using an approved recruiter?
Well, the ministry has been receiving reports of persons who have been scammed, especially in the online space. A lot of it happens in the online space. Persons are asked to, jobs are advertised, persons are asked to pay monies through bank accounts. They don't meet the persons face to face. They're just asked to pay monies after conversations. And once they pay that money, sometimes they can't find those persons again. So, and then it is too late. It becomes an issue now where they will have to report it to the police because it's now fraud. So, some of these scams are taking place, all over the country, and, we really need to try and put a stop to it.
Anything to add, Julian?
I believe that persons who are older, they should use trusted sources to assist them to use the internet so that they are not becoming victims of fraud. Because I understand the internet is pretty diverse and persons may not feel comfortable. If you are not comfortable, please ensure that you are using a family member, a friend that understands, so that you do not sign on to these online opportunities and end up being defrauded.
Let me just add that persons should not be conducting this type of business in a vehicle or on the roadside or under a tree. That's a huge red flag. Once somebody takes you to a space like that, you know that something is wrong. So you walk away from it. Okay.
And there was a press release, Brandon, in January this month, explaining what we're requiring of, in particular, the H-2B and some other workers. Do you want to explain what it is that we are requiring in order to not cancel someone's visa request?
Sure. So when you are applying for a visa, whether that's an H-2 visa, a J visa, or a Q visa, we're now requiring that all applicants in the "Did anyone assist you with preparing your application" field in your DS-160, we're requiring that they list the authorized recruiter that they are working with to secure the job in the United States. That authorized recruiter must be listed on the list provided by MLSS or the Department of Labor in order to be accepted for processing by the U.S. Embassy. If the information is not provided, or if that recruiter is not listed on those documents by the ministry or DOL, the application will be suspended and it won't be able to be continued.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to pass to another question about the Jamaican Temporary Worker Security Program. Is this a program that the MLSS agrees with and supports?
Maureen, the Ministry of Labor and Social Security is in total support of this program, because for years we've had so many persons who have become innocent victims of this kind of scam and fraudulent activity. And we have been at pains, and even last year we spoke about it on the same platform, that people need to be a little bit more vigilant, and having the system also move to protect the workers themselves is brilliant. The Ministry of Labor and Social Security is in total support of this program.
And if I may say too, for us from the consular section here at the embassy, no matter what type of visa you are applying for, it is really important on your electronic application form that we call the DS-160. It is really important that you are completely honest with every single answer, whether it's your marital status, your current employer. If you're not employed right now, put that you're not employed, who you're going to visit in the US, who you're going to work for in the US, who helped you prepare your application, who your recruiter was, previous trips to the US, any prior problems with immigration in the US, anything and everything. It's really important to be honest, as well as if you are in an interview here at the embassy, to be completely honest and straight forward and forthcoming with any and all answers that the American consular officer asks you. That is really important for you and for us to make the right decision about your request for a visa. If I may turn another question to MLSS, as we've talked about, Jamaican law, H-2As must go through the ministry. H-2Bs and others must use an approved recruiter. So what happens if someone doesn't go through the MLSS, or they don't use an approved recruiter, or a recruiter is not certified with MLSS and they are operating in Jamaica? What happens?
Well, the chances are that that person could get scammed and find that the only recourse they have is to report it to the police and await the outcome. Because once they do that, once the person is illegal, we cannot approach that person unless it is to have the police arrest them. And they will have to wait the entire outcome of that process before they can get back their money.
Okay. So the first thing that a worker needs to do is check the MLSS and LMIS website to ensure that you are seeing that recruiter on our current list. If for some reason you're not seeing that recruiter, please get in touch directly with the MLSS. We have telephone numbers that are also published that you can get us directly so that we can verify with you.
Thank you. A question, we received some questions ahead of this program from the public, and one of the questions was, can recruiters charge a fee? Would you mind speaking about that?
Well, there's a registration fee that is charged by recruiters. The legislation allows for that, 2,500 Jamaican dollars, a registration fee that all persons who are seeking assistance, whether it's to go overseas, 2,500 Jamaican dollars. There's a placement fee for persons also who are going outside of Jamaica, being placed overseas. That's 45,000 Jamaican dollars, except for H-2B workers. Persons going to the US for H-2B non-agricultural jobs are exempted from this fee. No placement fee, no recruitment fee for those workers.
And does MLSS charge any fees for H-2A agricultural workers?
No fees.
So there is no need to pay anyone at the MLSS or on behalf of the MLSS or for the MLSS the Ministry of Labor and Social Security's agricultural program has absolutely no fees.
Brandon, would you like to speak a little bit about if certain fees are charged, the U.S. employer likely has a duty to reimburse the worker for paying those fees?
Of course. So under Jamaican law, as our MLSS colleagues stated, there are certain fees that can be charged. But under U.S. law, the important thing to note is that none of those fees can be passed on to the worker. So any recruitment fees at all need to be fully covered by the US-based employer. The only fee that the worker is solely responsible for is their passport fee that they pay to the Passport Immigration and Citizenship Agency in Jamaica to obtain their Jamaican passport. The visa fee, transportation costs, registration costs, any associated recruitment costs needs to be fully covered and or reimbursed by the US-based employer. In most cases, we see that the visa fee, which is also required to be reimbursed, is reimbursed within the first week of employment when the worker arrives in the US. And the inbound transportation costs, so the costs that the worker pays to get to the US, those are required to be reimbursed by the US-based employer within the first half of their work contract.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that if someone is interested in working in the US as an H-2A or H-2B, they have to pay for their own passport application fee. The visa application fee will most likely be covered by either someone here in Jamaica or the US employer. Maybe they might have to pay it themselves and then certainly keep receipts for everything that you pay. And then you seek reimbursement from your US employer, and the US employer is required to reimburse you for that. And then other expenses such as the placement fee or the registration fee, if those apply, the worker should get receipts and then request reimbursement from the US employer.
That's correct.
No placement fee for H-2B, no placement fee.
No placement fee for H-2Bs.
The important thing is that, as you said, they obtain receipts for everything that they're paying and that they seek the reimbursement. The issue arises when promise of reimbursement is made and then no reimbursement happens. And the US Department of State, the US Department of Labor, and the US Department of Homeland Security maintain liaison with each other and investigate labor violations. So it's important that if any workers are noticing illegal fees being charged or they're not being reimbursed by their employer in the US, it's so important that they share that information with somebody, whether that's MLSS or one of your liaisons in the United States or someone in the fraud prevention unit at the US Embassy. The US Department of Labor also has a hotline that people can reach out to. And the US Department of Homeland Security also looks into these matters. They could be addressed with any CBP officer at a port of entry as well. So the important thing is that workers are aware of what their rights are, what they're supposed to be paid, what they're supposed to pay and not pay, and that they speak up and not be afraid to say something if they feel like something's not right. No one should feel intimidated that they can't speak to anybody about the fees or that they're unsure about something. They should just reach out and ask the question.
Okay, and I have another question for you, Brandon. If I am a worker, do I know ahead of time where I should be working, what sort of job I'll be doing, what city and state I'm going to? And then what happens if my employer tries to switch me to a different place or a different job?
Yes, so definitely. Every U.S. employer is required under U.S. law to supply the worker with a work contract that designates their hours, how much they'll be paid, where they'll be working, what their duties are, and what their position is. So everybody that comes to apply for a visa should have already been given that information. And that's really all important to be able to protect themselves because they know where they're supposed to work, how much they're supposed to be paid. And if any of that information changes, they have a record of what was promised. It's really, really important that folks are going to work where the contract and where the petition for the H visa says they're going to work. If that changes and they are said, they're told by the employer or the recruiter that they're now going to be placed with a different employer, it's super important that the worker formally apply to the Department of Homeland Security, USCIS, and petition to switch employers. It needs to be a formal petition that's made and then approved before someone can start work at a different location.
Okay. And all H-2A and H-2B visas are petitioned based, which means that the U.S. employer works with the Department of Labor and the United States Citizenship and Immigration Service to get an approved petition. All of those petitions have a petition number. Can the public, if they have been recruited by someone here in Jamaica, can they write to the Fraud Prevention Unit to check on whether a petition number is valid?
We typically wouldn't answer questions like that outside the context of an application,
Okay.
but certainly if someone applies for a visa and they give us information for that visa, we'll be able to tell them if they have a real petition or not, and if the petition's valid. Occasionally there are petitions for H visas that are not applicable for Jamaican workers. They may be limited based on nationality, for example. And that's something that we would address at the time of interview, and then we would ask the applicant to go back to their recruiter and get a new petition that applies for Jamaicans.
Great. Another question that has come in ahead of time is, so most times the U.S. employer is required to provide things like meals in the U.S., transportation to and from the work site. What should workers do if they are not being afforded those reimbursements or those services? Who can they report it to?
You want to go first?
Well, we do have a liaison service in the United States, and the primary focus of that liaison service is the welfare of the worker. Anything that concerns the welfare of the worker, including the work that they do there. So any issues at all that may arise in relation to those should be directed to their liaison officer. Each worker is assigned a liaison officer, depending on the area that they're located in. So complaints like that should be directed to your liaison officer.
So once a worker is scheduled for flight, they're given the information about their liaison officer. And once they have left the destination country, United States, they are totally in the hands of our liaison service. And they look for everything in relation to the welfare of the workers. So the worker has that extra layer of security when they get to United States. And if there is a problem, they can always liaise with us here in Jamaica, as well as the U.S. Department offices.
Correct. So as I said before, there are many different resources on the U.S. side of things that folks can reach out to, us included here at the embassy in the Fraud Prevention Unit, and they can do that by emailing Kingston FPU, which stands for Fraud Prevention Unit, the @ state.gov, Kingston FPU at state.gov. There's also the Department of Labor hotline, which is 1-866-487-9243, and also an email, help@humantraffickinghotline.org, or you can text help to 233-733 within the United States. So the Department of Labor, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Department of State all really work together to help protect Jamaican workers, along with MLSS and their resources based in the United States.
And about the liaison workers, we know that the Jamaican government has their embassy in Washington, D.C. Are there any other offices that cover other parts of the U.S.?
Well, our main office is right there in Washington, the Jamaica Central Labor Organization. We do have officers in other areas, located in other geographic areas, but the main office is really in Washington, D.C.
And you said that before the workers leave Jamaica, they're given the contact information for the office that will cover their area where they will be working.
They are, and we do have officers that are well known to the
Yes.
workers already.
Yes.
We do have officers in Florida, New York, and different spaces.
Washington
So
State,
they do
yes.
know their liaison officer, and many of these liaison officers already have introduced themselves even before the workers leave. And especially new workers, we try to look out for them, especially that they may not be aware of the systems.
Right.
And so the more seasoned workers, we ask them to be their brother's keeper so that they share information about the liaison services as well.
Thank you. Brandon, I'd like to address the next question to you. If I am a worker in the US and my visa is expiring, am I allowed to stay and keep working past my visa expiration? Or when I entered the US, I was given what's called an admit until date. Am I allowed to stay and keep working, or do I need to leave the US?
So under the H program, folks can go on the program and work up to 3 years in the United States. But it is important that you remember your admit until date, which is designated by Customs and Border Patrol when you enter the United States. Typically, on a single application, someone will go work for 8 to 9 months, and then their petition is over and they would return back to Jamaica. That's usually when the admit until date ends. If they would like to extend their time in the United States to work up until that 3-year mark, they can apply for an extension with the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service to either be placed onto another petition or to extend the petition that they're working on currently if the employer already has another one, for example. The important thing is that that application is made prior to the expiration of their admit until date, and the extension is granted prior to the admit until date. So if you apply and you haven't been granted an extension and you reach that date that you're required to depart, it's important that you depart, because if you do not do so, you will be considered an overstay on your visa.
Okay, thank you. And Andrea and Jillian, is there a limit on the number of visas that someone can apply for as an H-2A or an H-2B?
So there is no limit. And we have workers that have traveled for 35 years, 40 years, and it's their whole life that they have served on these programs. And what we ask workers to do is to ensure that they keep within the law and within the guidelines of the U.S. Department, and also to work to the best of their ability when they go to the employers, that Jamaica remains #1 for the seasonal work programs.
Jamaicans are known to be competitive. Yes.
Oh, yes, we are.
And hard workers.
Yes.
And hard workers.
And
Yes,
hard workers.
hard workers, and definitely an attractive.
And they're seen as
labor
heroes
force.
in their communities
As
when they
well.
travel for successive seasons on the programs.
Okay. And is there an age limit, either a minimum age or a maximum age, in order to participate in the H-2A or H-2B visa program?
The minimum age is 21 years of age, and we are a little bit flexible, but we normally use 45 years as the upper limit. Why? Because we want workers to be able to have a relationship with the employers and be able to travel for a few years successively, so that once they go on, they are fit, able, and some level of relationship with that employer to go on more than one of the seasonal years.
Okay. And for H-2A applicants in particular, do they choose their employer? Do they choose where they're going to work? Or does the employer choose them? How are people matched up with their skills and the jobs that are available?
Well, normally we try to match employers with workers, in terms of their skills and qualification. But normally what happens is that the employer will get a worker. And if that worker performs very well, he will be calling back that worker. And that is why we have so many workers going for so many years, and we have a high rate of return. 85% most times of our workers are returning workers. And they usually have a really great relationship with their employer.
Maureen, it's such a beauty to see the farm workers coming back with their certificate for 25 years of service, 10 years of service with that employer. And they learn the new technology, they come back to Jamaica, and there's that kind of transfer of knowledge as well. So many go back to the same employer, but we also encourage them to be open to go with another employer, because you may just learn some new skills that's beneficial to you.
And are family members able to join the H2 worker in the United States?
So on the H2 program, there's a visa class to accompany an H worker. It's called H4. It's for a spouse or a child of an H1 or an H2 worker to go and accompany that worker in the United States. In order to qualify for the visa, the same requirements for a non-immigrant visa need to be met, which is that they overcome the presumption of immigrant intent and that they're solely going to travel to accompany their family member on the work program and then return to Jamaica after the conclusion of the program.
And can a common law spouse go on one of those derivative visa categories, or does it need to be a legally married spouse?
It needs to be a legally married spouse. Common law does not qualify anybody for derivative status under U.S. immigration law.
Okay. And you already talked a little bit about how long people can stay in the United States. One thing I think we see sometimes here at the embassy is that H2 workers tend to be, unfortunately, attractive targets for lotto scamming, because the lotto scammers know that they're going to be in the US for some time, and they might want those workers to receive money in the US and bring it back here. So do we have any public service announcements, perhaps from MLSS or Brandon, on why it's important to avoid altogether any kind of lotto scamming related activities?
Well, that is something that we would really want to discourage. I mean, we don't want to tell our workers to keep far away from, things of this nature, because that can only land you in big trouble, both with Jamaican law and with US law. Yes.
Did you want to add anything, Brandon?
Yes, of course. I mean, whenever you travel through an airport, you'll always hear the Department of Homeland Security's announcements. Never accept any baggage, never take any packages, never agree to hold something for someone when you don't know what is inside it, never agree to carry money for somebody. These are really important things, because if you're caught with something in your possession that may be contraband or may be criminal in nature, you will be held accountable for that item, whatever it may be. And so it's important that everyone maintain vigilance and stay on the up and up and make sure they're traveling in compliance with US law.
Thank you. Do you have anything else that you would like to add?
The image of our program depends on what you do as a traveling migrant worker. And we absolutely say no to fraud. We absolutely say no to scamming. And the image of Jamaica depends on what our workers do. And we want to encourage our workers, if there's anything that the Jamaican government needs to know, please use our numbers, let us know, so that we can help to protect the integrity of our program.
Or at least talk to a liaison officer confidentially, to let them know what is happening.
In the same vein, all tips to the Fraud Prevention Unit are confidential. Our goal is always to protect the integrity of the visa issuance process and protect the rights of all workers and all visitors to the United States for whatever purpose that may be. So if anything is happening that they think should be brought to our attention, they can file tips by contacting us at kingstonfpu@state.gov.
Thank you. We also received a question ahead of time. Someone asked if the recruiter here in Jamaica or the employer in the US is allowed to keep their passport and sort of hold it hostage until, let's say, the end of the application process here or the end of employment in the US. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely not. No one should ever maintain control over a passport unless it's issued to that person. Whether it's applying for a visa in Jamaica you should always have your passport delivered back to your home address, or you should go pick it up in person yourself once the visa is issued from the Document Service Center. No one, including a travel agent or a recruiter, should be maintaining control over your travel documents.
And we join Brandon in saying, absolutely not. Your passport should not be held by any recruiter or employer. It should be with the worker.
Right, right.
And unfortunately, we have seen a couple of times here in the embassy that someone here charges maybe thousands of dollars in order to be to someone so that they can be a part of the H-2A or H-2B worker, not the H-2A, but more the H-2B worker program. And they have to work it off in the US via their service. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, Brandon? Is that allowed?
Absolutely not. No, absolutely not. Recruitment fees of any sort should not be passed on to the worker. They're required to be paid by the US-based employer, and that interaction occurs between the employer and the local foreign labor recruiter in Jamaica. The worker does not interact in that exchange of fee process. That's something that is agreed between those two parties. The worker has no part in it. So if someone's asking you to pay money in that type of range, thousands of dollars, absolutely not. Do not pay anybody to go work on any of these programs. The normal fees to be paid, like we said before, is the visa application fee, which is reimbursed. And if you choose to pay someone to fill out your application for you, that should be a normal fee for that type of service, usually less than 6,000 Jamaican dollars. So if someone's charging you to go on the program itself, that's something that's not allowed.
That's a red flag.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Big red flag.
Yes. So we are running out of time, and I would like to turn first to our MLSS colleagues for any final messages that you would like to give to our audience.
So we are always very happy with this kind of partnership, strong relations that we have with the U.S. Embassy Kingston. And the image of our program depends on the workers. And I believe this is an absolutely good platform that a worker, wherever you are in a rural area, you can access this information directly from the MLSS and also the U.S. Embassy here in Kingston, Jamaica.
Thank you.
I would like to use this opportunity to advise persons to do their due diligence before paying over monies for a chance to go on these programs. Please make contact with the ministry or any of the sources that we provided a short while ago to ensure that you're doing the right thing. Please do not pay over your monies and then you find yourself in problems with these fake recruiters. I call them fake recruiters. Please, I implore you all.
That's an important message because we really don't want people to be taken advantage of, because this is such a great program for both countries, and in the vast majority of situations is an enormous success. So I would like to turn to Brandon for any final messages from the Fraud Prevention Unit here at the Embassy.
Yes, I just echo the same things from our counterparts at MLSS. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your partnership. And, in the Fraud Prevention Unit, we are trying to facilitate legitimate travel. We want this program to be a success. It's a wonderful program for both countries, as Maureen said. And if anyone wants to verify if a recruiter is listed on MLSS's website, please reach out to them. If you want to verify Department of Labor recruiters, please reach out to us. We're always happy to provide that information to you via email. You just reach out to us at kingstonfpu@state.gov. We accept all tips confidentially. And if you see anything that you believe is illegal or shouldn't be happening, please report it. That's the only way that we can take action and make sure that we're protecting Jamaican workers' interests. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you again, Jillian and Andrea, for being here from the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Of course, Brandon, my colleague here at the Embassy. And thank you very much to you as the audience for joining us today for today's Consular Conversations Facebook Live. We hold these once a month. on Wednesdays, usually the third Wednesday of each month. And we appreciate you tuning in, and please have a great rest of the day.